Hello everybody, welcome back to Dispatch Tea and Therapy. I am Lucinda, your host, and it has been 4 months since I last posted on my YouTube channel. That is the longest break I have ever taken from this channel, and honestly I wasn't sure I was going to come back. And I want to be honest about that because that's kind of the whole point of this space. What I realized looking back was that the channel was starting to feel like I was emotionally processing my exit from 911 in real time. And that was never supposed to be what this was about. It was supposed to be bigger than just my story, even though my story is part of it. It was supposed to reflect something universal, the systemic ways that 911 can harm the people inside of it. So I stepped back. Not because I ran out of things to say. Anybody who knows me knows I could ramble about this topic forever. And Lord knows I have not gotten any less busy, but because I needed to make sure that I could come back and talk about the stories and the issues without it being me still bleeding on camera. So, some things that have changed. You may or may not have noticed that the Portugal videos are gone. That chapter of the channel is on hold, not because Portugal is off the table. I am still 1000% committed to bugging out as soon as I can. It's just more personal than I want to share right now, and I need the space to be focused because I clearly don't have the time to do all of those things. I also may shift to posting every other week instead of weekly, she said, as if I'd ever been posting weekly so far. I haven't really decided yet. What I do know is that I want to maintain momentum, and so I'd rather do it right than do it fast. What I am sure of is I'm happy to be back. I still have a lot to say about 911, even though I'm not in it anymore. Maybe especially because I'm not in it anymore, and because I'm so much healthier and happier on the other side. And I want for the people that choose to stay there, to stay in those chairs, to also feel that same level of healthy and happy. And so we have to talk about that. We have to talk about how that happens and how it can happen. And it's Monday, and Monday has always been Merry Moon Day, the day I talk about what I'm grateful for. And I have a lot to be grateful for. So fair warning, this might sound a little braggy. I'm okay with that, because I'm going to go ahead and brag on myself anyway, because when you find that you are coming back to yourself after any kind of big change, any kind of big process that you went through, it deserves to be celebrated out loud. So the first thing I'm grateful for today is my internship. So I start my internship this year, and here's the funny part. I applied for this internship in April of last year, so almost 18 months before I was supposed to start, because I completely misread their timeline. But it turns out that mistake was the best thing that I could have done. They accepted me immediately. It's a paid internship. It's telehealth. I have since submitted my application to the school, my application for the field experience. But a couple of months ago, my site's clinical director reached out of the blue. We had not spoken in a while. There was no need to. And asked me 2 questions. 1, can you start earlier? Will your university allow it? Now, my first instinct was to say there's no way. There's no way, because this is a very structured program. But here's the thing. I don't tell myself no anymore. I used to. So I asked my school, the field office management, whatever. And they initially said no as well. They're like, no, we don't really do that, but we don't know everything. Talk to your advisor. So I talked to my advisor, and my advisor said, well, you can actually start a whole quarter early if you take 3 classes this summer. So who's taking 3 classes this summer? That's me. That means I begin my internship at the end of August instead of November, which means I graduate in May of 2027, not August of 2027, which is 3 whole months earlier. What that literally means for me is that the summer of 2027 will be the first summer in, by then, 7 years where I had to work and go to school both. And it will be the first summer when I'm just working. My graduation also lands right before my birthday. My birthday month is May. So the blowout party is already being planned in my head, and I could not be more thrilled about that forward momentum. The second thing I want to talk about and really take a minute and mention is my current job, because it deserves more than just a line item. I mentioned before I am a certified peer support specialist at an inpatient psychiatric hospital. I had barely hit my 90-day mark when 2 months later they gave me my annual evaluation. Apparently there's some weird cutoff date. Don't ask, I really don't understand it. I'm still 5 months away from my 1 year, which is in September, but I still got my yearly eval. And one of the first things that was said in that eval was, and I quote, "How lucky are we to have Lucinda, as our peer specialist. I don't think I'll ever forget that line, because even at my very best annual evaluation in 911, no one ever said anything that lovely. It just reaffirms that this is the right place for me at this time. I've had such a wonderful time with this job. At this job, I get to build things. One of the things I've been building over the past several months, I developed a program from scratch, which is a standardized transition care kit for patients who are being discharged to homelessness or unstable housing. People who are leaving inpatient facilities with no solid place to go. So I built the program. I wrote the grant proposal to fund it, months of work and research, and just this past week, we got to submit it. We expect to hear back in late June or early July, and I really hope that we get it. It's a really deep, unmet need, but whether we do or we don't, the work positions us to refine and resubmit, because that's what good grant work looks like. But here's the thing I want to name because it matters to me. My supervisor, immediately after I left her office after we had hit submit, sent an email to our CEO, our CFO, and other senior leadership recognizing my work on this grant by name, calling out my initiative and dedication, saying, and I'm going to quote this directly, "We truly have some remarkable people doing impactful work here." I have never had a supervisor go to that level of leadership in writing to say something that beautiful about me. Nor have I had the opportunity to work at a place that allowed me such freedom to build these programs. I literally went to her and said, "I have this idea," and she said, "Great, run with it." And that's what I've done for the past several minutes, I wish. I'm not gonna read the whole email on camera. That is what the blog will be for, and I will link it below. But I wanted you to know it happened, because if you've spent years in a system where your work went either unrecognized or actively minimized, you understand exactly what that moment felt like. It felt like being seen for real. The next thing, we're traveling back to my school now. I belong to CSI, which is Chi Sigma Iota, the National Honor Society for Counseling, the gold standard, and our chapter at my university is the largest in the country. Recently, through the encouragement of our CSI Leadership Boot Camp cohort, I put myself on the ballot to be president-elect for the next year. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't expect to win. It's a big school, lots of opportunities to apply, lots of PhD students. I just didn't expect to win. But I did. I did. I won. So I'm now CSI president-elect for the year. It's actually a 2, I guess maybe 3-year position. It's really weird. You spend the first year as president-elect learning the role, knowing how it works, and then next year, as I'm literally stepping out of my master's degree and into my professional life, I will become chapter president. So that timing of the networking, the mentorships, the visibility this creates, I can't overstate how good that is. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then the third year, where I said it was 3 years, it's like you become past president. It's a really interesting way to do things, I guess. Another thing I'm grateful for, I think this is number 4. I recently got to see Gabor Maté speak in person. If you don't know who that is, write this down. Gabor Maté, G-A-B-O-R-M-A-T-E, little accent over the E. He is a physician and an author whose work sits at the intersection of trauma, addiction, and the mind-body connection. 2 of his books that I would put in front of every person who has ever worked in 911, The Myth of Normal, which is about how so much of what we call dysfunction is actually a rational response to an irrational environment. And In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is about addiction, but is really about the universal human need for connection and what happens when that need goes unmet. Seeing him live was, I don't have a small word for it. He is one of those thinkers whose framework just reorganizes how you see things, including how I see what 911 does to people over time. If you're in 911 and you haven't read him, start with The Myth of Normal. That's all I'm going to say about that here. I'll talk more about it maybe in the blog. The next thing that I'm grateful for, we're going to talk about the research. This one is for my 911 people specifically. I just completed a virtual poster presentation at a statewide conference in Gainesville, Florida. The topic, 911 and cumulative trauma. I have built an entire conceptual framework for studying what happens to people inside 911 centers over time. Not one incident, not one bad call, the accumulation, the weight across years, what it does to a person and why the research has largely looked away from it. I presented that framework just recently to researchers and clinicians, and they were interested. So I have not forgotten about you. I want you to hear that clearly. I am out of that space, but I am coming for the research. I'm going to make sure that what happens to people in that room has a name, has evidence behind it, and gets taken seriously in the places where decisions get made. The paper is being written right now. I should say the first paper is being written right now, and I'll share more about all of that in the blog. And eventually, I'm going to need some of you to participate in the research itself. I think plenty of you will say yes, because I know you want to be seen. That leads me to my next bit of mentorship that I received recently. I was mentored by Dr. Len Ferenc. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I always get it wrong. She's one of the major names in the trauma field through the International Society for International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. ISTSS. I was part of an abstract review program where I learned how to evaluate research. What makes a strong abstract, what doesn't land, and what gets selected and why. This is going to make me a sharper researcher and a better writer. And the professor, who has been my former professor, still at the school but not a professor currently, who's been mentoring me and mentoring my work, believes that my first conceptual paper is publishable, and she wants to co-author a second paper where we actually dig into the research together, which is great because I've never done a research paper for publication, so I need that guidance and that mentorship. That paper, again, will be about 911 and cumulative trauma. So the conceptual paper is being written by me right now. My professor believes that it is publishable. We'll see. So that's where we're at right now. A possible journal article, my name on 911 research. I mean, I still need a second every time I say that because research was not my thing. I was not going to go into this for research. But it turns out, in addition to being a budding clinician, I am also apparently a researcher. So that's going to be an interesting journey. Other things to be grateful for. I was recently also elected as the graduate student representative for the Washington Mental Health Counselors Association. That was another election that I put myself on the ballot for. And what that means is I now have a real seat in professional advocacy conversations for mental health counseling in the state as a grad student, before I've even finished my degree. Another pathway of connection and mentorship and guidance that I can get. I spent years in 911 watching decisions get made by other people about workers and systems, sometimes by people who were not ever in the chair. Now I get to be in some of those rooms in a different field for a different population. I plan to be useful there. I plan to learn a lot there. We're not done yet, though, unfortunately. No, fortunately for me, we're not done yet. Maybe unfortunately for you if you're still listening to me. I was also recently elected secretary for Counselors for Social Justice. Counseling is not a politically neutral profession. The people who need mental health support the most are often the ones with the least access to it. The systems that are supposed to help people can also be the ones that harm them. I know something about that. So being part of Counselors for Social Justice means being part of a professional community that takes that seriously, that says the work of counseling is connected to the work of equity. And I am glad to have a role in that. I've said a lot, and I've said before and I'll say it again, I am glad to be back. I've shared a lot. A lot of really good things are happening, and I'm really excited about that. On Wednesday, we're getting into the first chapter of the story I've been sitting with for a while. We're going to talk about what I call the start of my 6-month descent into leaving. It started with an inquiry. I'll talk about what the inquiry alleged, what the evidence actually showed, and what happened anyway, and what was taken from me as a result. I'm not telling that story from a wound anymore. I'm telling it because it matters, because if you're in 911, you deserve to know what these processes can look like from the inside, and because that's part of my research now, the systemic harms that come from systems that uphold bad practices. In the meantime, I hope you're finding reasons for joy. I am outside today, if you can tell. I know it's probably a little bit noisier on my video because there's background noise and dogs barking and planes overhead, but it's so lovely to be outside and not have to be bundled up. The sun has been out, so I am finding ways to stay grounded. Plenty to be grateful for. I hope that you are finding ways to be grounded and grateful. And I hope wherever you are in your relationship with 911 that you are finding your way towards thriving. We're going to talk a lot about what needs to change in 911 for that to be possible. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here now. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to dig into this stuff. So in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, and hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday.